Hi, so we are here with Andi with RxLA, and she is going to tell us a little bit more about what she does and how she's making a difference in the world. Go ahead, Andi.
Thanks so much for having me, Becca. Very honored to be here. So I am an affordable housing developer in Los Angeles. I started a company called RxLA, so like filling the prescription for affordable housing in Los Angeles. And how I got into this work is that when I was in college, I volunteered at a soup kitchen for chronically homeless adults. And I felt incredibly compelled by this population, and I wanted to better understand the underlying issues, like sort of why these folks were in this position, why they kept coming back, what were the public policies and private practices that were either helping to address the root causes of homelessness or making their situations worse. And so I sort of started to study that in school and ended up learning a lot about the affordable housing crisis, and decided that I wanted to focus on housing policy and learning more about affordable housing in general. And so I ended up going to school to study housing policy and then got a job working at a local nonprofit in Los Angeles, a big nonprofit that developed affordable housing for the chronically homeless population. And I loved the work that I was doing there. There's an amazing affordable housing finance system that exists. But the problem with it is that we have such a massive affordable housing crisis locally in LA County and such a massive homelessness crisis that all of the tools in the existing system, even if we use them at maximum capacity, they will never help us build enough housing to come close to addressing the crisis. And so what I wanted to do was work on new ways to finance affordable housing development so that I could try to create another method for expanding the supply outside of the traditional method. And so I wanted to focus on using private funds from impact-oriented investors. And I wanted to focus all of my energy on figuring out how to do that. And so that is why I started my own company. And right now I'm working on my first project, which is really exciting. It is an affordable housing development in South LA, and it is specifically for the homeless population. The type of housing is called permanent supportive housing, which means that in addition to an apartment, it also comes with supportive services for all of the residents. So it's like a regular apartment building, but on the ground floor, there is a social service office with a case management team who can provide services for the residents and help them get back on their feet, stabilize, stay housed, and become thriving community members. And this concept, permanent supportive housing, is the nationwide best practice. It works really well for ending homelessness. And so I'm trying to take this model that we know works really well and just figure out a different way to finance it.
That's so cool. Thanks for filling us in about that. So since we're talking about like women and women's history, I wanted to ask what your experience has been as a female entrepreneur, and now, like, especially since you're working on these huge development projects. I don't know much about the industry, so I don't know if it's male dominated or not, but I'd love to hear a little bit about what your experience has been.
Sure. It's an interesting question. So on the one hand, yes, it's a super male-dominated industry, just real estate in general. And so on the one hand, I was at this conference last month for my industry, and they give out a sheet with all of the speakers, and 90% of the speakers were men. And I looked at the woman sitting next to me and I whispered to her, wow, like I need to make sure I do some really good work for the next couple of years so that I can be up there and represent women on one of these panels in a couple of years. So I definitely noticed that, and I definitely feel like I have a responsibility to continue pushing the needle in that way. But on the other hand, So I'm working on this development right now, and I'm the owner, and as the owner, I often have to organize and run project meetings. So I'll be sitting in a meeting that I'm running, and I'm surrounded by my architects and general contractors, and it's me with 5 men basically, and I'm running the meeting. And what's interesting is that the fact that it's me surrounded by these men is sort of an afterthought for me. I don't sit there thinking about it. I sit there and have a meeting with my colleagues, and in that sense, I feel incredibly grateful that I don't spend more time thinking about the fact that I'm a woman. Um, and I know that that's only a reality because there were generations of women before me who worked really, really hard to make sure that your gender didn't define what you could or couldn't do. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I'm grateful that we've come such a long way, but I'm also aware that there's still work to be done in terms of being a woman.
That is super, very well said. Yeah, thanks for that perspective. And if you would like to share, do you have any female leaders or role models, either dead or alive, because it's either women who have made history or women who are making history?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people that I admire, and especially in my industry, a lot of different pieces of people that I try to emanate and look up to. But in terms of like thinking of just one sort of more iconic person that one iconic woman who has made history in my mind. The first person that comes to mind is a woman named Biddy Mason, who was actually one of the first African American women to purchase and own property in Los Angeles. And she had such a crazy life. She was born in the early 1800s as a slave in Georgia, and had a horrible life as a slave, and ended up going across the country on foot with one of her owners, and ended up in California. And in California, where slavery was illegal, she was supposed to get her freedom, but her boss, or her owner, I guess, tried to then move so that he didn't have to free his slaves. And she stood up to him and went up against him in court, which was unheard of, and it's just so crazy that she did that at that time, and she won her freedom. And she was a midwife, which she sort of like did on the side. And once she gained her freedom, she sort of honed her midwife skills, became really successful, made a lot of money, which she saved, and then followed the example of some free men who she was close with, and decided to invest and buy herself a piece of property, which she did. And she kept buying more property and amassed a fortune. And what was really interesting is that she also was incredibly philanthropic, and with her money that she made, she shared it. And she started a church out of her living room. This is in the 1800s, and the church still exists today in Los Angeles. I read a crazy story about her, where there was a big flood in her neighborhood that destroyed all of these homes, and she went to the local grocery store and opened up a tab and said that anyone who came in and needed food, whether they were Black or white, she would pay for it and to put it on her tab. And I don't know, I guess it's an amazing story, but I think what's amazing about it to me is that she just, despite the most horrid circumstances, she still kept going. She still kept learning and making an effort to better herself and observe those around her. And she just fought for what she believed in, and just kept going even when all of the odds were against her. And she took a really scary path. And even when she, found success, she still made a point to be incredibly generous with others. And just the fact that she kept going and had the energy to continue to build a better life and to do good for others is really inspiring to me.
What an awesome story. It's like I mean, I've never heard about her. It's like an untold story almost. So thanks so
Yeah,
much for
kind of.
sharing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
her name, so it's Bridget Mason, but she went by Biddy Mason.
that's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. And then the final question that I have for you is, do you have any pieces of advice that you would offer to women getting into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, one of the things that was so inspiring to me about Biddy Mason is how she just kept going. I think entrepreneurship is really, really, really hard, and um, it takes a lot to stick with it. And I think it's really important to just remind yourself every day to keep going and to stick with it, even if it takes a really long time and it's really hard, because that's how you build something and that's how you hit success. You just have to keep going and keep reiterating and stick with it, even when it's slow. So that's one big piece of it. And then the other piece of advice is just to do your homework and keep learning. Learn everything you can about your industry and the entire ecosystem around your business, all of the players involved, and understanding how it affects everyone. And yeah, just do your homework. Do your homework and stick with it.
I love that. There's no shortcuts here.
No, no
But
shortcuts.
before we wrap up, where can people find you?
Oh, where can people find me? I don't have a super strong social media presence. I am on LinkedIn, or you can always email me at Andi, ANDI, at RxLA.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andi. It was awesome hearing everything about your experience at RxLA. Thank you so much.
Thank you.